Hey there, my name is Ethan. I'm 24 and was born and raised in a small town in Indiana, but I recently moved to a quiet suburb to start fresh. Life at home was complicated. I work as a mechanic at a local shop. It's not flashy, but I love fixing things. There's something honest about it. You see what's broken, get your hands dirty, and make it right. When I first got here, I didn't know anyone. Most nights it was just me, my modest rental house, frozen pizza, and the sound of passing cars. I wasn't looking for anything. I figured life would rebuild itself slowly, piece by piece, like an old engine. But sometimes life surprises you when you least expect it. Um, it happened one Saturday afternoon. The sun was blazing the air thick and humid from a morning shower. I was walking back from the hardware store carrying a bag of tools for a side project when I saw her. She was in the yard 2 houses down, kneeling beside a flower bed, wrestling with a stubborn garden hose that had sprung a leak. Water sprayed everywhere, soaking her jeans and t-shirt, but she kept at it determined. I probably would have kept walking. I didn't want to seem like the creepy neighbor, but something about her stopped me. She looked sad, not just frustrated with the hose, but heavy, like she was carrying the weight of the world. Need help, I called out, holding up my tool bag as a peace offering. She looked up startled, her deep blue eyes meeting mine for a split second, like she wasn't sure whether to trust me or tell me to go. Then she nodded slowly. Yeah, she murmured, her voice soft-tired. That'd be great. I crossed the yard and knelt beside her. It took a quick fix to stop the leak and tighten the connector. Easy fix, I said, handing her the hose. She gave a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. Thanks, she said. No problem, I replied, wiping my hands on my jeans. I'm Ethan, by the way. Just moved in down the street. She hesitated before responding. Samantha. We stood there awkwardly for a moment. She fidgeted with the hose like she wasn't sure whether to say more or retreat inside. I glanced over my shoulder, trying not to push. If you ever need anything fixed around here, I'm pretty handy. Just holler. Samantha nodded again, but I could tell she wasn't the type to ask for help easily. She had pride, but also deep hurt. As I turned to leave, I noticed the glint of a wedding ring on her left hand. My chest tightened slightly. I didn't know her story, but it didn't take a genius to see something was wrong. No man in sight, pain in her eyes, the way she seemed half present, like part of her was somewhere else entirely. I didn't ask. It wasn't my place. As I walked back to my house, I glanced over my shoulder. She was still standing there, hose limp in her hands, watching me go. She gave a small, almost shy smile, real this time. That night on my back patio with a cold beer, listening to crickets, I couldn't stop thinking about that smile, about her loneliness, about how life sometimes brings two broken people together. I didn't know it then, but that cracked open door was the start of something unexpected. Mom. The next few days passed quietly. Samantha and I saw each other a few times from a distance. We didn't talk while she tended her garden, pulling weeds or carrying groceries inside. I didn't want to push. You could feel the grief around her, the kind that didn't welcome company. Still, something pulled me in every time I passed her house. Maybe the way she moved like she was carrying invisible chains, or maybe that small smile from the first day haunting me more than I wanted to admit. One evening just before dusk, I saw her struggling again, trying to fix a rotted front step on her porch. It looked dangerous if she kept using it. She was crouched down, hammer in hand, frustrated and overwhelmed. I hesitated for half a second before crossing the street. Hey, I called out, you're gonna hurt yourself doing that. She looked up, wiping hair from her face with the back of her hand. It's fine, she said almost reflexively, but it wasn't. Let me help, I said, setting down my tool bag before she could argue. Honestly, two hands are better than one. This time she didn't resist. She stepped aside and sat on the top step, pulling her knees to her chest, watching me work in silence. The step was an easy fix, a few boards, a handful of nails, but I felt her eyes on me the whole time, heavy, mournful. You do this for a living, she asked quietly. Sort of, I replied, smiling slightly. Mechanic. Grew up fixing anything that needed it. Guess it stuck. She nodded, tugging a sleeve over her hand like she was cold despite the warm evening. When I finished, I stood wiping sweat from my forehead. They're good as new. Should hold you for a while. I thought that was it. Another small interaction, another polite thank you, another lonely walk home. But then she surprised me. Want some lemonade? She asked, her tone hesitant. I just made some, I smiled. Sure sounds great. Boy. Inside her house, the air was cooler, but the silence was heavier. Not just the absence of sound, but of life, like the house itself was holding its breath. The living room was tidy, but small details told a story. A folded American flag and a glass case on the mantel. A wedding photo of Samantha with a man in uniform. Both radiant young, full of life, his arm tight around her shoulders. Samantha caught me looking at the photo. "That's my husband," she said, setting two glasses on the coffee table. Her voice faltered on the last syllable. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. She nodded, looking down at her hands. "Car accident." I didn't know what to say. Nothing felt enough. Instead of fumbling for words, I sat across from her and took a sip of lemonade tart, a bit too sweet, and it made my chest ache. We sat in silence for a while, just sitting. Samantha gave a faint, dry laugh. "Sorry, I'm not great company right now." "You're fine," I said. "You don't have to be anything." She looked at me like she wasn't sure whether to believe me. "Everyone keeps telling me it's time to move on," she said. "Like grief has a deadline." "There isn't one," I replied without thinking. "Some things stay with you forever. You just learn to carry them." She stared at me for a long time, and for a moment I thought she might cry, but she didn't. She just nodded, almost imperceptibly. Ahem. I finished my lemonade and stood, not wanting to overstay. "If you ever need anything, just knock," I said again. She walked me to the door. As I stepped outside, she said quietly, "Thanks, Ethan." I turned back and smiled. "Samantha, call me anytime." The door clicked shut behind me, but it didn't feel as heavy as before. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about her sitting there, small and fragile, but still standing, fighting every day to keep going. I wasn't sure what would happen next. I hadn't planned anything, didn't want to rush her, fix her, or be a replacement. But deep down, I knew I wasn't just a neighbor anymore. Something had shifted between the broken porch step and the silence in her living room. And for the first time since moving here, I didn't feel alone. Bah! A storm hit out of nowhere, one of those late summer Midwest thunderstorms. Heavy, loud, angry, with a strange greenish sky and electric air. I was at my window, half watching the rain streak the glass when I saw it. Samantha's garage door flapping wildly in the wind, barely holding on. Without thinking, I grabbed my jacket and ran across the street, my boots splashing in puddles already forming. I pounded on her door. "Samantha," I shouted over the wind. "Your garage!" The door flew open. She stood there barefoot in jeans and a worn sweater, her hair damp and clinging to her face. "I know," she yelled back, trying to be heard. I couldn't get it closed. "Stay inside," I said, waving her back. "I'll handle it." Before she could argue, I turned and ran to the garage. The wind fought me, yanking the door like it wanted to rip it off. I wrestled it into place, jamming a piece of wood into the frame to hold it. It wasn't pretty, but it'd last through the storm. By the time I got back to her porch, I was soaked, water dripping from my hair and clothes. Samantha was waiting, holding a towel, looking at me with a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. "You're crazy," she said, laughing slightly. "Yeah," I replied, shivering. "You're welcome." Bye. She stepped aside to let me in, and I didn't argue. The storm was getting worse by the minute, thunder rumbling, lights flickering briefly before settling into a dim, eerie glow. "Here," she said, handing me the towel. "Come sit by the heater." I kicked off my boots and followed her to the living room, dripping water everywhere. She disappeared and returned with a sweater and sweatpants. "They might be a bit big," she said, handing them over, "but at least they're dry." I didn't argue. I went to the bathroom, peeled off my wet clothes, and changed. The clothes smelled like her, soft, clean, a hint of lavender. When I came back, Samantha was on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, knees pulled to her chest, looking small and vulnerable. I sat in the armchair across from her, unsure what to do or say. For a few minutes, we just listened to the storm, the rain pounding the roof, the occasional thunder shaking the house. Umatsum. Then out of nowhere, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm too young to be a widow." I looked at her. She wasn't crying, wasn't even looking at me, just staring out the window, the rain blurring the world beyond. I didn't say anything, I just listened. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Everyone thinks I'm strong," she said, almost to herself. "They say things like, 'You'll find someone else,' or 'You're still young, you'll move on.' Like it's that easy. Like it doesn't matter." I could feel the weight of her words, their rawness. "I don't want to move on," she said. but I can't live in this emptiness either. I leaned forward in my seat. I didn't want to scare her off, but I needed her to know she wasn't alone. She finally looked at me, really looked, her eyes glistening but not yet crying. "Stay with me tonight," she said softly, so quietly I almost missed it. It wasn't desperate, wasn't pleading, just human, raw, real. It wasn't about anything physical, not about something she wasn't ready for. It was about not being alone anymore. I nodded. "Okay," I said, my voice steady. "I'll stay." "Hmm." She smiled, a small, broken thing that hurt my chest more than anything else. I moved to the couch and sat beside her, careful not to crowd her. She leaned in slowly, hesitantly, like she wasn't sure I'd pull away, but I didn't. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders and she rested her head on my chest. We stayed like that for a long time, listening to the storm rage outside. No words, no promises. Just a quiet understanding between two broken people trying to hold each other together. I felt her breathing slow, her body gradually relax, and for the first time since I moved here, maybe for both of us, the world didn't feel so cruel. Just two people sitting in a storm, finding shelter in each other. Though the storm raged, outside Samantha's living room felt warm quiet. She hadn't moved in a while, her head on my chest, her breathing shallow at first, but slowly deepening evening out. I didn't dare move either. It wasn't about comfort for me. It was about being exactly where I needed to be. Minutes blurred into hours. Samantha barely flinched when thunder shook the walls. I tightened my arm around her reflexively, protectively, like I could shield her from whatever she carried inside. At some point, the power went out. The lamps flickered and died, leaving only the soft glow of the fireplace and distant lightning flashing through the windows. I didn't mind. It felt right somehow. Her breathing grew heavier against me, not fear, but exhaustion. She needed this, needed someone to lean on, even for one night. I stayed awake the whole time listening to the storm, watching lightning dance across the room. I could feel Samantha holding me a bit tighter now and then, even in her sleep. She was smaller than she seemed, fragile, like she was made of something that could break if not handled with care. But there was strength beneath it all, a quiet resolve that refused to let life crush her completely. But the storm finally faded around sunrise, the thunder softening to a distant murmur, the rain a steady drip on the windows. Samantha stirred against me, blinking awake. For a split second, she looked confused, like she'd forgotten where she was or why she wasn't alone. Then she glanced up at me, her hair messy, face puffy from sleep, and something in her eyes shifted, embarrassment, maybe shame. She sat up quickly, pulling the blanket around herself. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice scratchy from sleep and something deeper. "Don't," I said gently. She looked at me, surprised. "You don't need to apologize," I said. "Not for needing someone." For a long moment, she just stared, like she wasn't sure it was safe to believe that. Her lips quivered slightly, and she looked away quickly, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "I'm not good at this," she said, almost laughing through it. "I'm not used to needing someone." "Yeah," I replied softly. "Me neither." Mm. She gave a faint but real smile, stood, and wrapped the blanket around her shoulders like a cape. "I'm gonna make some coffee," she said. "Want some? I'd kill for some," I joked, and she laughed, a real laugh, soft and breathy. I watched her walk to the kitchen barefoot, the blanket trailing behind her. She moved carefully, like her body was still remembering how to be alive. I sat on the couch, feeling something shift inside me, not pity, not obligation, but something quieter, stronger. Respect, admiration, care. By the time she returned with two mugs, the sky had turned pale gray, the first hints of morning breaking through. She handed me a cup and sat across from me, knees tucked under the blanket. We sipped in silence for a few minutes, not awkward, but comfortable, like the quiet you share when words aren't needed anymore. Um, After a while, she spoke again. "You don't have to stay," she said calmly. "You probably have things to do." I shook my head. "Nothing's more important than this." She smiled slightly, looking down at her mug. "You're dangerous," she said softly. I raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous." "For someone like me," she explained. "Someone just learning to stand up again." I leaned forward, setting my coffee down. "I'm not here to pull you down, Samantha," I said. "I'm here to help you up if you'll let me." Her eyes welled up again, but this time she didn't wipe the tears away. She let them fall silent and soft. When she finally set her coffee down and reached for my hand, it felt sacred. Her fingers were cold at first, trembling slightly, but I held on gently, no pressure, no rush, just letting her set the pace. We sat there hand in hand as the world outside slowly woke up. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, if she'd pull back or if fear would shut her down again, but right now she wasn't alone, and neither was I. Ah. The weeks that followed felt different. At first it was subtle, Samantha waving from her porch when I got home from work, or coming over to ask if I needed an extra hand while I worked on my truck. Small things, small cracks in the wall she'd built around herself. I didn't push, didn't chase. I was just there, a steady presence, a safe place for her to lean into when she wanted. Some days she was quiet, lost in her thoughts. Others she smiled easily, her voice smooth and melodic, like she was slowly learning to breathe again. We spent more time together, drinking coffee on her porch, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her husband James, how they met in college, built a life here, and how it ended so suddenly. There was no anger in her voice, just grief, but also something else, a budding acceptance. But one Saturday we went to a small park outside town. Samantha packed a picnic and we spread a blanket by the lake. It was a beautiful day, bright sun, gentle breeze, the kind of day that felt untouched by the world. We sat for hours watching ducks glide across the water, talking about the future in that vague, half-joking way people do when they're too scared to be serious. At some point, she grew quiet. I turned to see her staring out at the lake, her face thoughtful. Then, without looking at me, she reached up and slipped her wedding ring off her finger. She held it in her hand for a long time, turning it over, the sunlight catching the gold, making it gleam. "I'll always love him," she said softly. "He'll always be part of me." I didn't say anything. I knew she wasn't done. But she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "There's still a lot of life left, and I think he'd want me to live it." She closed her hand over the ring, held it to her chest for a moment, then carefully tucked it into her bag's small pocket and zipped it shut. Bye, Shamaida. When she finally looked at me, her eyes were wet, but there was something else, something brighter, hope. She smiled a real beautiful smile that made my chest ache in the best way. "I'm ready," she said. "Suppose you are." I didn't hesitate. I reached out, took her hand in mine, feeling the warmth of her skin, the steady pulse. "I've been ready," I said quietly. Samantha rested her head on my shoulder, and we sat for a long time watching the sun dip lower over the lake. It wasn't the typical love story you see in movies, neither flashy nor dramatic. It was slow, sometimes painful, but real. We didn't rush anything. We didn't need to. Over the next 6 months, we built something new. A different kind of life, not a replacement for what she'd lost, but something that honored it while moving forward. We spent weekends fixing up her house together, took day trips, hiked trails, visited small towns, got lost on purpose just to have an excuse to stay out later. We laughed more. We kissed finally, a cautious, tentative kiss one evening, under the porch light as I walked her home. Later, much later, we talked about the future, the kind of life we could build together without rushing or forcing anything, just dreaming. Samantha reached over, took my hand and said, "I'm glad you stayed that night." I squeezed her hand gently. "Me too." We didn't need to say more. Right. In the end, it wasn't about saving each other. It was about finding the strength to keep living and choosing to do it together. Not because we were broken, but because we'd found something worth rebuilding. Two people, two pasts, one future. The thunderstorm had passed, the house was warm again, and for the first time in a long time, Samantha and I were more than just surviving. The story of Ethan and Samantha offers a deeply moving lesson about the healing power of compassion and presence in the face of profound grief. It reminds us that life's most meaningful connections often arise in quiet, unexpected moments, like a neighbor fixing a hose or staying through a storm. Ethan's choice to be there for Samantha, not to fix her pain, but to simply sit with it, teaches us that true kindness lies in showing up without agenda, offering a safe space for someone to feel seen and valued. Samantha's journey from the weight of widowhood to rediscovering hope shows that healing is not about erasing loss, but learning to carry it while embracing life again. Their slow, tender bond underscores the importance of patience and respect for someone's pace in rebuilding after tragedy. It's a reminder that love and connection can bloom from shared vulnerability, but only when we approach it with care and authenticity. This story resonates because it captures the raw beauty of human resilience and the quiet strength of being there for one another. Have you ever found solace in someone's simple act of kindness or been the one to offer it? Share your experiences in the comments. We'd love to hear how these moments have touched your life. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and join our community for more heartfelt tales that explore the depths of human connection and healing. Let's keep the conversation alive and inspire each other with stories of hope and compassion.